It's a combination of apathy, yeah, sure. It's a combination also of great subconscious trepidation, which again is manufactured by the external world to make people think in terms of lack. All
Right.
that fear that comes across the television, all that fear about economy and shaky economy and potential disasters. You see, this scares people into thinking, where will I get another job? Oh my God, woe is me. I've got to be very, very careful. And I mean, this ties into the whole mystical psychology of how a person thinks regarding their entire prosperity. And I don't just mean in a more limited way of, earnings and whatnot, but I mean in totality, because it all hangs together. People have been traumatized in the truly deep meaning of that word. We just don't think so because normally you see a traumatized person somewhere on a gurney being wheeled into a casualty ward, or some person from a wreck or whatever. That's what we imagine is a trauma situation, and we don't even see it walking around the streets unless you're highly sensitive and you can bloody well feel it, and then that's a whole different subject matter. But I can assure you that most people walking around in the world today are deeply traumatized. They can barely hold the jobs that you're describing, the ones that they've got.
Right.
Because on those 2 to 3 days off, it's a case of medication and alcoholism and so many other little, avoidances and calamities that are going on in their private lives. Never forget that, you got the person who's working, and that same worker, and I've had this from the horse's mouth in exactly the same way you just described there about people.
Yeah.
I've had it from the horse's mouth also. That people sometimes don't even want to go home. They don't want to be alone. They want to head down to the pub and the bar and even hang with a lot of people they don't really like, just to avoid being alone of an evening, you know what I mean? Or even have the lights off. We're living in a super extroverted, outer-directed world in which people actually very much want to go to work because it's better than, the other. So it's the situation in which, Patrick McGowan, for instance, showed in The Prisoner, in which everyone wants that number. They're absolutely happy to be a pawn because there's even a certain amount of sadism. I believe there's sadism as a core aspect of the human psyche. And there's just enough sadism to have people in a managerial or sub-managerial position where they can nag and bicker and have a little bit of power over some other guy that they can kick out the door, some Mexican they can push around, at work and, give orders to, or some little naive, timid person they can sort of, flirt with and destroy their lives. There's enough. See, we got to look at the fact that the big boys at the top are sadistic and tyrannical and whatnot. But I have with my own eyes seen equal, if not more tyranny, more passive aggression, in Stanford Mall where I used to work in America, and in other places when I worked retail, and walked around the streets and did common labor.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just me, my own eyes that have been trained to see this, but I saw it everywhere. And I don't mean in the fat cop who comes along to give you a ticket for no personal reason, the particular, scenarios or situations. In which most, exactly, not the most obvious. I'm talking about in the least obvious, in the way that people even treated their animals, in the way people treated their front garden. We're back to, environmentalism again, or we're back to conservationism again. And what is conservation? Conservation, using one plastic cup and then chucking it away, getting 2 straws and then throwing it away when you barely take a sip out of a cup. Take a walk down any American boulevard and you'll see the opposite. You'll see, I don't give a damn what the Gores of the world are screaming, or the bigger questions.
Yeah.
Let's look at the lack of conservation, and the lack of environmentalism in the most small things. Look at the way people treat their bodies, all the way up to the psychic sadism that people perpetrate on themselves, and then all the way down to the bottom of just even what they eat. So again, it comes back to the old thing that if you want to go and buy all that GMO and all of that stuff, and if you want to get your petrol from BP and from Esso or Exxon or whatever, and you want to buy the Monsanto, Frankenfoods, you are the tyrant. Stop blaming the people upstairs. They create some garbage, you're eating it, you're paying for it.
Yeah.
So, you see, this is the thread that I see, which is the continuation of, yes, there is definitely 100% the sorcery going on from on high. And the big problem, everybody's scratching heads, going, what are we going to do about that? Well, what you do about it is the secret is just like almost a chakra thing. It's almost like a Kabbalistic thing. The head is reflected in the bottom. The 1 is reflected in the 10. The upper is reflected in the lower. Even Joseph Campbell pointed this out when he did his schemata of the chakras, in which the highest chakra, something about the highest chakra, is in fact emulated and present perhaps in a different form, of course, in the lowest chakra. The yin-yang. In the black is the white. In the white is the black. So, you see, the tyrant's face is in some sense a reflection of everyone's individual face. And that's why my message is not so much political, it's always going to be psychological, and it always will be. Because even though I see all of these political and then social and environmental, sociological phenomena, I understand that it's like, you know, radiating from a central battery, a central core, a central crystal. And what goes into that crystal is the psyche of man. It's man's thinking. But it's just because our children have never been trained this way. We ourselves have never been trained this way. The last book that anyone will ever pick up is a book on psychology. We know that. So therefore, we are running ignorant. And we are able to then be led by these sheepdog, some with a smile and some with a bark, in whatever direction, you know, they want to take us. The only thing that is positive is the observation of the enemy. When people talk about, you know, what's positive about any of this, is the observation and the discovery, which is now, I'm glad to say, going on, of the fact that you now know that there is a parasite among you. You see, it's like, you know, the table of 12, not realizing there's a Judas, you know. It's like a criminal conspiracy in which you don't even know, you know, who the element is. And remember, it's often a culprit, a perpetrator, a predator within the body politic. This, of course, taken to its fullest concomitant, it's about the genes, again, that we all contain an alien DNA, so it's very easy for people of a stronger alien persuasion to work on us, because we have something of them inside of us. I mean, there's so many ways to look at this. But more akin to what you were talking about is to see, yes, it is very difficult for these people, and that's why it has taken so long. Because remember, the world was a very different, you know, kind of world, even 100 years ago, when our fathers worked on the fields, you know, and died in mines and died in factories. And just pushed horses and plows on the fields, you know, to move us into the new age where the technologies are now restored and so on. But these people, they have had great successes as well. But they're ruthless and they're psychotic. So if they ever feel that they're up against something that, you know, does get in the way of their plan, be it the biggest plan or a plan that's just more pragmatic, like they will destroy and mutilate and murder to forward their goals. It's like, obviously, this thing with Iraq falls into that same category. It's only part of a greater plan, but in order to move the plan forward, look how ruthless they have been.
Yeah.
So it's been like that all down through civilization. Yes, they targeted the Druids and wiped them out. That was a huge, you know, positive success for them. That's always been something that's a marked, you know, success. That's why they did it. They had a very, very clear understanding that if such people existed, not a single one of their acts of sorcery would have continued, you see. Not one of their monstrous paradigms or any of their cities, these ugly, filthy, rotten cities that people think are so wonderful and normal, or any of the kind of farming, you see, or any of the relationships that we have to nature would simply not have been permitted by people who were in tune with the earth and who knew what was what. I mean, just cut it right down to there.
Yeah.
They certainly would not have been able to work on the human mind, which is a form of attack that has happened since the advent of the cities, and since man has been, you know, clustered in these awful towns and cities. The next step then is to work on them as one herd, indistinguishable of class or, you know, creed or whatever, anything else. They all come under the one leash at that point. Well, that also wouldn't have been, you know, permissible. It wouldn't have been possible with a kind of a priestarchy that knew what was going on and who warned its people about this kind of thing. You see, but then, of course, the earth catastrophes, the physical catastrophes that just happened on the earth that traumatized people, happened at the same time as these great conflicts, between the Nephilim, between the Lemurians or the Atlanteans or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
so it was a combination of all things that were happening at the same time has actually helped, because that traumata that fractured the ego is the central thing to understand when you're talking about solutions to the problem. Because if your patient is already basically psychotic and only held together with the thinnest glue, and that any kind of trauma, any even minor trauma, can split his consciousness again, you've got the perfect mannequin. You've got the person who can be completely controlled, you see. And unfortunately, maybe it wasn't their cause that did it. They didn't cause this, but it's a byproduct of the age of catastrophe. It's a byproduct of the splitting of consciousness. That person is now so existentially weak, so psychologically impotent and infirm, that of course they're going to believe in all this Christian crap and this Judaic rubbish and this Arab, what do you call it, this Islamic nonsense, or any of the other religions and all the other little splinter groups, and look at all the sects and cults and bullshit that's in our world. This, from the Jim Jones stuff all the way up to whoever, right the way up to the most, in my ideas, the whole Judeo-Christian thing couldn't be a more sinister, edifice. But why does it exist? It exists because people, in a state of almost complete and utter blindness, believe literally that the Pope is some sort of holy person, or that, Jesus is going to come back and save their ass or something like that. So we're dealing with people, you see, who are equally, maybe that's wrong to say equally, but I would say, almost as insane as the people at the top of the pyramid. So getting back to your point, where has there ever been a true, and I mean true, adjusted, spiritualized normalcy that any of the other stuff can be read as antithetical or adversarial? Is not the entire world psychopathic and basically sadistic and wrapped up in... So the only time that my message uses the we, or addresses people as a collective, is to say, I'll tell you where you're collective. I'll tell you why my message goes out to you all. People are in a dire state of absolute... And it wouldn't even matter whether you had an Illuminati praying over your ass, or, sadistic royal families, or warmonger. The state that you're in is, like Plato said, subhuman. The job of religion, the job of any true spirituality, was to try and get you from the subhuman level up to the human level. And you are people who want to find out what the angels are doing and what God might be doing? Yeah. How dare you, said Plato. Think first, or Socrates said through the symposium, can we agree that the way man acts towards his brother, the way he acts towards the women, the animals of the world, the way he acts to the nature of the world, which we talked about, the true conservation, is subhuman in exactly the same way? If you watch the end of the movie The Green Mile, or so many other films you see that deal with this, that basically shows you the kind of suffering and horrendousness and sadism that is operating in our world. Man is already, and I believe that is partly through artificial, reasons that he's been suppressed. But let's leave that aside for a moment. The fact of the matter is that I don't care what level of profession the person's at, no matter what qualifications they've got, no matter what type of academic status they have. I don't give a damn what collar they got around their neck and what church they come from. Everyone I see, with only extremely few exceptions, those you can count on the fingers of half a hand, are in a state of pathology or psychically, deranged people. So, and it doesn't take much to see this when you're really cold about it and you really look at what people are about and what they're doing and what they talk about and the kind of nonsense that they're into, okay? This is calling a spade a spade. It is no wonder then that in a pathological, recalcitrant situation like that, that ghouls, specters, ghosts, monstrosities, all manner of vile things start emanating. It's exactly the same thing you'd expect from a boneyard. I've seen vultures hopping in India where they have, the abattoirs and the boneyards are outside. They don't even have them covered up. Anything dead, they just throw in a gigantic, really huge, sometimes stretching over acres of just the most rotting, stinking... in fact, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, actually seeing that kind of thing. And what did I see hopping on the top of all that? Well, there's the vultures and there's the carrion crows. And it's never, ever, I've never forgotten about that because I see it in exactly the same way when I look at this, the world in which we're living. So if you have these George Bushes and if you have these popes and if you have these, black popes and if you have all of these monsters, and we know their biographies, people like myself, we study them, we talk about them, all over our websites and in our books and stuff like that. But if you see individuals like this, and if you see them even in the average schoolyard, and if you see these people even at your place of work, in the most, all around you, some people that are just, so ridiculous and so sadistic and whatnot, it is not because they are some freak, just person that fell from the sky. Yeah. They are an outgrowth of a very, very toxic situation. And therefore, the only way that an individual can change that situation is to change themselves. There's no we about it at all. You have to, just like I've always used this analogy in the movie Nostradamus, when the whole city he's in, and it's been a while since I've seen the movie, so I can't remember where he was exactly, but plague has come to the entire city, and everyone is dying, and also everyone has gone kind of mad, so they're running around with insanity, you see. And what does he do? He goes over by the well, he strips himself off completely naked, and he brings up the clean water that's still clean from this well, and he washes himself off. And the camera pulls back because it wants to give you, the makers of the movie are trying to communicate to you an incredible metaphor here. And that metaphor is a real metaphor. And that is that no matter how bizarre, and believe me, just need to watch MTV and you'll find out that we're pretty bizarre. You just need to watch what's coming out of Hollywood and you think, how more weird can it get, right?
Yeah.
Or you have to watch it and you go downtown and listen to what people are talking about any given weekend. You can pretty tell me it's bizarre, all right? So here we are, and you're in the middle of this. You're in the middle of this absolute chaos where people are pretty much teetering on the edge of total pathology, total insanity. And, even a lot of the people have known this for a long time, so they're on medication. It's all over. They're self-murdered or whatever, description you want to give to it. The only answer is to do this concept, like this Nostradamus character is doing, and that is find the well, find the still spot point,
right.
find the center,
water.
which you have within yourself, or as Joseph Campbell would have said, find your bliss, and go there. And it can be many things that bring you to there, but it will not be the same for Michael as it will be for Adam. It will not be the same for the person who's listening to us right now as it will be to their neighbor. It'll be different. Don't expect a one-size-fits-all, A to Z sort of, directory as to how to do this. This is the beauty of the shamanic way. It's the beauty of the individual way. And that is that, it's individual. There was one crazy horse. There was one Jesus Christ. There was one Buddha. You know what I mean? There was one Merlin. There was one King Arthur. Why is it one? Because that's the whole message of history, is that it's the individual. So anytime that you hear the we, the us, and the our, particularly, of course, it goes without saying, when you hear it coming from a major situation in which, like, say, we were using Gore as an example there with this new little clique, this new little thing. Yeah. What is that? That's another we, our, us. That's another man, another animus figure, another godlike figure, another priest, another sorcerer, you see, standing up on stage, waving his wand, talking about some traumatic thing. So number one, he's leading you away from your personal consciousness. It's always an external, they want your money, they want your checks, they all want you to focus on some external, global issue. So don't look at the psyche. Number two,
right.
he is a steadying archetype, or because he represents the father archetype, they pick a man and pick a politician who will, have those characteristics. Not that he has the faintest idea, he's just some egomaniac loving the ride, but, the people who are controlling him, they would know all this, they would understand all of this psychology, whether he's aware of it or not is a whole other point. And thirdly, it's absolutely collective, because people get together in collectives for one very simple reason. And this goes to the heart of everything you've been talking about. What is the main key? What is the main problem? What's the main solution? Here it is. People go towards collective things. They're attracted towards collective things because they're deeply insecure inside. Therefore, you lean on your brother. It's you need to lean on people now because you're terribly dependent. You're the opposite of independent. Independent, as I said, a talismanic word that's used, it has no validity anymore. And therefore, there's a reason why people want to sit there in these mass audiences. You see, there's reason why they want to sign on to all this nonsense, no matter what it is. There's a reason why they play the political game, even when they know, as you yourself have said, that it leads bloody nowhere except to more chaos, you see. It's all rooted in the psychology of people having no longer any ego centrality, no egocentricity. That's all been shattered and broken. There's many reasons as to why that is, and they all need to be studied. And when people are that weak, that solitary, they're going to run into marriages, they're going to run into collective action, they're going to run away from themselves. And as soon as society, any of these, figures, these people who are playing the archetypes, present something to you again, it really can be people as preposterous as George Bush, or as preposterous as John Hagee, in the Christian movement, or as preposterous as Billy Graham and all the tribe of people like that, and they just have to put on a smile, and they just have to talk in a certain way, and believe me, people are going to be gaga. And the reason is they're running headlong from themselves. They have no inner core whatsoever. It's gutted. It's like a cemetery in there. And so the answer is to turn that around. The answer is to try and give people some awakening to this, and hope you can't give it to anyone anyway. It has to come from inside, but at least you can present the signpost that says, look, this kind of action that you're involved in leads to disaster. Let me show you how. I can show you the message of the past, and I can show you the message of what's going on in our world today, and I can present the evidence that shows you that this kind of action, this kind of political action is nowhere. And I can show you that this kind of psychological action is far greater, both for yourself in the short term and for the world, in the larger term. A teacher can show that. He can try through his life to demonstrate these facts and draw on the proofs and evidences for this. But whether or not the world get it, or whether the world, buy into that, is absolutely their own affair. It is, because believe me, it doesn't matter. If people want to play this game, if they want to have all of this stuff coming down, then by all means they can have, and they can deserve the tragedies that befall. I am no pessimist. I don't care about that. If this is the road that men have to go on towards destruction, then so be it. Somewhere it is written in the natural order that that will happen, and there'll be a new order to come out of this, this defunct world. There'll be a new growth, a new order of things in a more natural way. I don't look at it as being a bad thing at all. Whatever is broken, whatever is bad, in the end it needs to be trashed. Yeah. So people have the opportunity and they have the choice to change, and it's up to them. And if they don't want to do it, then fine. Then we'll have a world that just descends into further and further debauchery and chaos. But I'm all right with that, you see. Let it happen, if it's meant to be.